What is an exchange sacrifice? The definition is trading a rook, which is a 5-point piece, for either a bishop or a knight, which is a 3-point piece. And when we all start playing chess, one of the first things we learn, what are the values of the pieces? And we use those values to create sort of a scoreboard of who's winning the game, right? We're all used to different sports, what the score is throughout the game. We use the value of the pieces to create our scoreboard during the game. Also, when you play online, chess.com or Lichess, you can see the material count next to your name. So this is always kind of hitting us in the face. What's the material count? And I think it's good for us to learn the material count when we start playing chess. But I think there hits a point in everyone's chess career where they need to focus less on the material. And for me, I think it's something that's been holding me back for a while now because I focus so much on the material. I used to never want to lose a pawn, or I never wanted to drop the exchange, lose the exchange. And I wouldn't appreciate when my opponent was going to, let's say, sacrifice a pawn or sacrifice the exchange. And this didn't start changing for me until I was about 2100 USCF. So something that helped me get to the master level was starting to put less value on the point values of the pieces and more value into other imbalances in the position. So now I talk about imbalances all the time, and we're going to go through that today. We're going to look at a bunch of examples where one side can sacrifice the exchange, and we're going to talk through it. Is it worth that exchange sacrifice or not? And how do these other imbalances weigh against the material balance? All right, so here's a question for you guys in the chat now. If a pawn is worth 1 point, what would you put the values of a bishop, knight, and rook? So you can put that in the chat. You can say B equals 3 or 3.1 or 2.8. I want you guys to use a decimal point. So we're getting a little into statistics here. On average, if a pawn is worth 1, how do you value those other 3 pieces? And if you want to say 3, 3, and 5, that's a perfectly valid answer. But I'm guessing a lot of you sort of have a favorite piece, or maybe you don't think a rook is quite worth a knight and 2 pawns, for example, etc. All right, Patrick is saying, outside of the standard values, Patrick is saying a bishop is 3.5, Chess Pro 3.25 on the bishop, 5.3 on the rook. Zweb is saying bishop a little bit stronger, knight a little bit weaker than the standard values. Same for Presta J, and the rook also a little bit weaker. Richard is saying 3.5, 3.5, 5. Yeah, I kind of agree with you guys. And I didn't mention the bishop pair, but the bishop pair can be worth half a pawn, according to a lot of people. So I think, on average, having a bishop should be slightly stronger than a knight. So somewhere around that 3.25 bishop, 3 for the knight, I think makes sense. And it does depend on the position, yep. And I think a minor piece in 2 pawns is almost always going to be stronger than a rook. Unless the rook just has full activity in the endgame. A lot of times when we have these exchange sacrifices, they occur in the middle game. And the minor pieces have a lot more value than that 2-point deficit. Oh, Dennis is saying 3.25, 3, 4.5. So he's not putting much value on the rook compared to the bishop. Interesting. All right, let's go to the next slide. So typically, exchange sacrifices lead to either having the initiative or the attack, or you get some advanced passed pawns that the opponent's rooks can't easily stop. So what we're going to look at today is very specific examples, and they come from this book by Axel Smith. It's called Black and White Magic. I like this book a lot. I'm about probably 60 or 70% of the way through it, and I think it's good even for club level players. So Black and White Magic by Axel Smith. And what it talks about is just a lot of different imbalances. So blockades, weak squares, opposite colored bishops. And one of the chapters is exchange sacrifices. So what we're going to go through today are exchange sacrifices that involve dominating a color complex. And that's exactly what that black and white magic title means. It's black and white squares and how to control the different squares. All right, so here are some kind of general themes. Bishops and knights control weak squares. Rooks tend to be clumsy in the middle game. So that's like we talked about. When there's a lot of pawns on the board, you're still in the middle game. Those minor pieces can have more value than the rooks sometimes. Exchange sacks can lead to extra activity. And a rook for a bishop can weaken the color complex of your opponent's bishop. So if you have, let's say, a light square bishop and your opponent's light square bishop got captured by your rook or traded for your rook, all of a sudden your light square bishop might control more light squares than the opponent's remaining rook can defend. And this tends to work well when you have opposite colored bishops also. All right, that's the summary. So let's change scenes here. So now we're going to jump into some examples. Let's get to the chess. Chess Pro is saying, love the beginner videos. Thank you, Chess Pro. All right, here is our first position. I want you guys to tell me in the chat, what are the exchange sacrifice features in this position? So white has sacrificed the exchange. Black is +2 on material that we can see here at the top. Put in the chat, what are the exchange sacrifice features? I have 4 points listed in my notes. So we'll kind of compare the notes to what you guys say in the chat. Also, this stream is not sponsored, but I'm working hard on a Liquid Death sponsorship. I put in an inquiry on their website. If they don't get back to me by the end of this month, you are not going to see Liquid Death on any YouTube videos anymore. They only get another 12 or 13 days. Okay, we have a light square bishop. Most of black's pawns are on dark squares. That's right. Semicolon is saying the light square advantage and the 2 passed pawns. Dennis is just saying domination. Domination on the light squares. Yeah, so I think you guys are on the right track. Here are the notes that I had. The white knight and bishop make good use of this f5 square. We also have the activity / attack on the h7 pawn. And the rook for black cannot access any of the weak light squares. So, rook can't access e4, f5, e6, and this bishop cannot access the light squares either. So we have this huge light square advantage. We have the activity, the passive pieces for black, and we have the additional passed pawns. So there are a lot of things going in our favor here. All right, so one of the best moves for white in this position is queen to e4. I'm going to turn off these. How do I turn off the arrow? I think it'll be off going forward. Okay. So queen to e4. Ignore the little question mark exclam. The idea is creating a discovered attack here. And what I want you guys to answer is, what is the eval in this position? So put your answer in the chat. What is the Stockfish evaluation? Black is up 2 points of material. And we've talked about the other imbalances that matter in the position. So how do we weigh those two against each other to create an eval here? Yep, Patrick and Zweb, I agree with you guys. Zweb +4, Presta J +2, Chess Pro 0.5. Ian is saying +2. I'm keeping my Stockfish on somewhat low depth. It's maxing out at depth 22, just to make sure that the stream doesn't get too laggy. Yeah, you guys have great answers here. So at depth 22, it's saying 0.7. But I think as Stockfish runs a little bit deeper, it goes slightly higher than that even. So I think if you're in that +1 to +2 range, that's completely reasonable. And even Zweb's +4, human against human play, this is a very difficult position for black. So I don't think +4 is even that crazy of a guess. It's definitely in the realm of possibility here. Chess Pro's asking why it's +2. It's all of these factors we've mentioned, Chess Pro. So it is partially due to the passed pawns. There's going to be a bonus for that. But the fact that these black pieces are so passive and that everything for black is on a dark square when white is dominating on the light squares and this king is in some danger, it's all of those factors combined. And when Jesse comes out with the Guess the Eval tool, we're going to talk a lot more about how to weigh these imbalances and come up with an eval. All right, let's go to the first game example now. Might have to refresh. All right, here we go. So in this position, black wants to play queen to a3. It's currently white to move. Yeah, before the inaccuracy, press to J on the last position. Black wants queen a3. It's white to move. Should white allow queen a3, or should white stick the rook on c5? So in the chat, just put yes or no. Is rook c5 the move that white should play? So rook c5. The reason this is in the exchange sacrifice lesson is because when you put your rook on c5, you're pretty much saying, I'm going to allow black to capture it with the bishop later on. And we see black's remaining bishop is on the same color as all of these pawns. All right, we got yes, 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 yes. No one is saying no. Chess Pro, not a GM. Only a national master. Yes. All right, this was a bit of a trick question. Rook c5 is not a bad move, but it's not the strongest move. It's actually better here not to sacrifice the exchange. And let's talk through why. Tell me what in this position favors white. Because pretty much all of the imbalances are favoring white here. List in the chat what imbalances favor us. And then we'll talk about why rook c5 is not the best move. But it is still a good one. It still holds a small advantage for white, but there's better. Okay, Constantine is saying white has extra space. That's right. Queen activity, okay. Bishop pair, backward pawn on e6, full on e5. That's right. And backward c6 pawn, yep. Weak dark squares, good. And this is going to be a bad bishop on d7, like we talked about. An outpost for the knight. Yes, that was the third key point. So I think the key points are the backward pawn here, the bad bishop, an outpost for this knight. So in this position, white already has a pretty big advantage. And when you have a big advantage, usually what you want to do is try to simplify the win, give your opponent less chances for counterplay. So even though rook c5 is not a terrible move, the reason this isn't recommended is because you're going to give black a material advantage when black had no imbalance advantages prior to the exchange sack. Does that make sense? So we don't want to give our opponent anything to play with. But when you give them material advantage, maybe long-term they can use that material advantage to fight back. So here, that's exactly right, Chess Pro. Knight to d3 is the top move. And after knight to d3, queen a3 there's now bishop to e1. Kind of a cool looking move. And we just hold all of the same imbalance advantages in the position. We haven't given black anything yet. And there's no c5 break. We have it completely covered. All right, so now let's see what happened in the game. Rook c5 was played in the game. And then bishop e8. White doubled on the c file. Queen moves, opening up the attack on the rook. White played knight d3. Black captured the rook. And now here's the next question for you guys. What is the best move for white? Yeah, bishop e1 was a nice move in that other line, defending our queen. Put your answers in the chat. What should white play here? There's a few different recaptures. Axel Smith really prefers one of the move, but the engine actually says they're all very close. There's not a wrong answer here. Knight takes c5. That's Todd's answer. Webb is saying d takes, trying to attack on the dark squares. Grow is saying pawn takes, and Chess Pro is saying rook takes. All right, we got all 4 answers. The move that Axel Smith likes here is d takes e5, c5, excuse me, for the reason that Zweb said in the chat. After d takes c5 and this knight moves, there's now bishop to d4, cutting all the way across the long diagonal. So white used the exchange sack to open up this dark bishop, which was probably our worst piece. It was boxed in by all the pawns. And if you look at the eval here, black is +2 on material. Stockfish is saying right around 0.3 when I ran this in ChessBase. So white's up 0.3, black is up 2 points in material. And a move like knight to d3 coming next is going to be, or sorry, not knight to d3. We want to move this bishop and put the queen on this long diagonal. So put everything on the dark squares and attack that way. All right, let's jump into position 3. Chess.com is being a little bit buggy, so just kind of bear with me. I have to refresh it every time. Or it's user error, one of the two. All right, so we're in the exchange sacrifice lesson. How should white capture on e4? Black just captured on e4. Pawn takes pawn. Do we want to capture with the bishop, the pawn, or the rook? Which is the best? Put your answer in the chat. And we'll look at all 3. We'll talk through it. Yeah, a lot of people said rook takes c5 on the last one. And I think that's the natural move, but opening up the bishop was pretty nice too. Presta J, rook just seems crazy to me, but he knows the topic of the class. But he also probably is thinking back to that last puzzle when the exchange sacrifice wasn't the best. Can't just give you guys exercises where you want to sack the exchange. Todd is saying bishop takes e4. Dennis is saying rook takes e4. Chess Pro is saying, why was rook takes e4 a great move? Webb is rook takes. Grow says bishop takes. Ian says bishop takes. So my default move in a game would probably be bishop takes e4. But that's because I'm still trying to work on exchange sacrifices. So if I just had this position in blitz or with low time on the clock, I'd probably think, let's just play bishop takes. Well, let's look at that. Bishop takes e4 here. This loses control of the kingside light squares. Black has a very strong move. Queen to d7. And this is already a slight edge for black, and that queen is very quickly coming into g4. And you can see how these light squares are becoming weak. And king g1 is the only move that's holding for white. And it's still at least half a pawn advantage for black. So black is much better here. They're going to take this bishop and come in with the queen very soon. So this is not ideal. We don't want to play bishop takes e4 in this position because black controls the light squares. Okay, so now let's look at pawn takes. This is better than bishop takes e4, but the problem with this is it's anti-positional. It's blocking in our bishop, it's blocking in our rook. White really has nothing to play for here, and black does have control of the f-file still. So even though the engine says this is about 0.0, I think it's probably going to be a little easier to play for black. You could argue, though, there's some imbalances in white's favor. Good knight here. We do have the passed a pawn. But this is an anti-positional move. It's boxing in our own pieces. So that leaves us with the brilliant move, rook takes e4. Now, if black takes this rook right away, which I think most humans are going to play, this is a mistake. We can now play queen takes e4. And after rook f7, we can start pushing this a pawn. And this is already a big advantage for white. So what's happening is we have this pawn attack twice, queen and knight. It's defended twice by bishop and queen. So that bishop's tied down to the pawn. The queen's tied down to the pawn. Our queen attacks g6, meaning this rook is tied down to the g6 pawn. All of these black pieces are tied down. Our pieces are all pretty active on the light squares. Bishop, queen, knight. We have the a pawn rushing up the board, and it's very difficult for black to figure out what to do here. The eval is already around +1.5 to +2 for white, even though the material is equal. So that rook takes e4 idea, going back to the start position, super strong, and it's all based on controlling the light squares. So when you play these positions in a game, you don't always want to sacrifice the exchange, just like we saw in the first example. Sometimes in exchange sack, you may just be down 2 points, right? You might be down the 2 points of material and have nothing in return for it. So you want to evaluate each position separately, but hopefully as we go through a few more of these examples, it'll just have you start to think more about exchange sacrifices, appreciate it not only from your point of view, but watching when your opponent might exchange sacrifice. Okay, let's go into the next example. Oh, this next one's a good one. Okay. This one's really cool. Need to refresh. All right. We got white to move here. The knight on c6 is about to be captured. Black wants to play rook takes c6. We take back with the bishop, then they take with the queen. And I think most of us probably are aware a bishop and knight are almost always stronger than a rook, and they're usually even stronger than a rook and a pawn. Yeah, Presta J is saying on that last one, seeing the position after the exchange sack, then you can start to appreciate how good it is. Hi, Sai, welcome to the chat. So, what is the best move here for white? Put your answers in the chat. We see rook takes c6 threatened. Presta J, are we playing rook b5 LOL? Now we're just looking for exchange sacks. What a ridiculous idea. Constantine is saying rook to b5. We want to save the knight. We don't want to allow this rook takes c6 idea. Larry is saying rook to b8. Engelbert is saying rook to b8. Sweb is saying rook to b8. All right, you guys are on the right path. Sai is saying rook to b8. It comes down to these two moves, rook to b8 and rook to b5. Todd is saying rook to b8. This is the natural move. We're not sacrificing any material. The best move for black is rook takes b8. And then after knight takes b8, bishop takes c4. So in this position, material is equal, but black has the bishop pair, and we have sort of a weird knight sitting all the way back there on b8. This is about half a pawn better for black. This was not the best. Rook to b5. This is the brilliant move. This gives white an advantage, and it's the strongest move. Now, after bishop takes b5, we have an option. A takes b5 or c takes b5. Which one do we want to play? Put your answers in the chat again. A takes or c takes? Webb is saying c takes. Todd is saying a takes. Sai, c takes. Constantine, c. Presta, c. This is an interesting one because there is no wrong answer in this position. A takes is 0.39. C takes is 0.49 in terms of stockfish eval. So they're both very close. The idea with A takes is you're going to try to utilize the weak pawns on the A file. You're going to try to win the A pawns and create a passer. Axel Smith says A takes is a mistake, though. He prefers C takes for the reason that some of you have already mentioned. I think Presta J mentioned it. C takes not only undoubles the pawns, but it opens up this diagonal. So white gets more control of the light squares. So C takes B5, very slightly better according to Stockfish, but Axel Smith definitely preferred this move in his text. And now the best move for black, or the move played in the game, I should say, it's second best. Pawn to E4, shutting out this bishop. And now knight takes A5 for white. And here, what are the imbalances? Let me know in the chat. What are the imbalances in this position? We have equal material. Zweb makes a good point. If I already sacrificed an exchange, why would I go pawn hunting when I could attack instead? Yeah. So you're saying you are not playing for the material imbalance anymore. You're playing for the activity and the attack. And Zweb's a very strong player, so he kind of appreciates finding that balance. Sai is saying knight for a rook. Yeah, that's right. What else? List out what the imbalances are here. Pass C pawn for white. That's right. Two extra pawns. Black king is less safe. That's a great point, Dennis. Opposite colored bishops. Yes, this is a good point too. So these bishops are opposite color. When you have opposite colored bishops with other pieces on the board, that can increase your attacking chances. Weak c3 pawn, that is true. Fortunately, we can push it, and we probably will, to c4 soon. And if our light bishop can get on these light squares, yes, black has weak light squares because they don't have a light square bishop. So all of these are exactly right. The eval here is around 0.6 for white at low depth. And I think the overall plan is to get the queenside pawns rolling. We have 3 pawns over here against 1. One of them is already a passed pawn, this pawn on c3. We have a potential passed pawn on the b file. This is going to be, I would say, close to a 2-result position already for human against human play. I think it's going to be very tough for black to win this game as long as white keeps pushing the imbalance advantage, which is these queenside pawns. All right, we got one more position to look at. Let me load her up. So this one, hey, Jesse in the chat. Jesse, do you want to share any news in the chat? Presta J says, hi, Jesse. So Jesse and I do the No Pawn Intended podcast like we talked about Wednesday nights. Jesse runs the show. And he has big news. New baby. As of either last night or this morning. Jesse, what time was the baby born? Everyone's celebrating in the chat. Congrats, congrats, party emojis. Congrats. So now, Jesse, we're going to need a baby cam on the podcast. Oh, 12:10 a.m. May 18th birthday. Dennis says number 6. Ian says no more sleep. Okay, let me get this position loaded up. Hey, Sadat, welcome. 4th baby. Weighing in at how many pounds, Jesse? 7 pounds, 14 ounces. All right, so this position, white to move, there are 2 good solutions. So put your answer in the chat. What is the best move for white? And we're going to go through one of the solutions in depth, and then we're going to circle back and go through the other solution. This is by far my favorite exchange sack position that I've seen. This is a great example. Jesse says, gotta jump. Thanks for tuning in, Jesse. Have a good rest of your day. Thanks for the guess. Rook d5. No hints, Sai. All right, rook d5, Sadat. Rook d5, Ian. We're following the exchange sacrifice theme. Webb is saying, I might have given it away. Rook d5 and rook f6. Rook f6. Okay, we got a few rook f6s in here. Oh, Constantine has seen this game before. This was another Axel Smith game. Axel's playing the white pieces. Dennis rook d5. Okay. Both. Actually, I'm not even going to tell you the strongest move yet. We'll circle back to the strongest move. The second best move is still good for white. It's rook to d5. So we will circle back to the strongest move after we look at this. The best practical try is bishop takes d5. This was played in the game. And now we have this choice again. C takes or E takes. C takes d5 is okay. C takes d5 undoubles the pawns, right? We don't have the doubled C pawns anymore. But it's actually a little bit better, as we've kind of seen in the previous examples, that we can go E takes d5, opening up this diagonal towards the black king. Constantine, the examples come from Black and White Magic by Axel Smith, which is a really good book for all levels. So we want to open up this diagonal to be able to attack the black king. So now queen to e8 played in the game. Bishop to d3, loading up on this diagonal. And notice the black rooks here. Black doesn't really want to play rook takes a3, sacrificing the exchange back, because there's still no imbalances that favor black. There are no imbalance advantages that favor black. And also black has to look at this knight. The knight guards a7, and if the rook goes to either a6 or a8, going up the board, then there's knight to c7, forking that rook and the queen. So these rooks are really tied down right now. So after bishop to d3, black played king to g7 in the game. This is a mistake. The strongest move is actually rook to a7. And white is still quite a bit better here, but the strongest move is to sacrifice the exchange back. And the interesting thing here is capturing, so this is around +1 for white still. Capturing the rook is a mistake. Now white's advantage shrinks after rook takes a7 because white just lost that monster knight on b5 that was helping this passed pawn and also supporting this passed pawn. So interestingly, the best for black was to sacrifice the exchange back, and white shouldn't take it. So after rook a7, a better move for white here would be, I'm looking at the Stockfish evals, bishop to e4, followed by queen to d2 and trying to get this d pawn going up the board. All right, so then let's see what was played in the game. King to g7 played in the game. Black wanted to get off this diagonal, use the king to defend this pawn, which frees up the queen. Makes sense. But now this shot, knight to c7, was played. And this is a super strong move, and it's hard to appreciate at first glance how strong it is until you see what's about to happen. So at first glance, you think, okay, knight hits the queen, but the queen's free to move, no big deal. Queen d7, right? Well, here's the question for you guys. Put your answers in the chat. What is the best move for white? What is the best move for white here? Let's see what you guys come up with. Rook takes, press to J, rook takes f7. Looks like something bad will happen to black. Dennis, rook takes f7. Patrick, rook takes f7. Constantine, bishop takes g6. So we're looking at these two moves so far. Yeah, press to J is saying you need to calculate it still. After rook takes f7. And what I like about this position, even though we've been looking at positional features, sometimes what you can do is take these positional features and convert it to a tactical advantage. And that's just what happened here. White had the positional advantage. The imbalances were favoring us or favoring white. But now white can convert that to a tactical shot. Okay, you guys are on the right track. You got the answers. There's two super strong moves. The third best move is also winning for white. It's around +4, and that's knight to e6 check, mentioned by Lyle. The top two moves are rook takes f7 check and bishop takes g6, and they're both completely over. White wins in both lines. My Stockfish is stopped at depth 22, and the eval on these moves are +15 for bishop takes pawn and +37 for rook takes f7. So essentially, it will find a checkmate with a higher depth. That's how strong they are. Bishop takes g6 was played in the game. And after f takes g, knight to e6 check. It's a mate in 5 if black doesn't sack the queen, because this queen is crashing in followed by mate. And in this position, rook takes f7. Also super strong. King takes f7, bishop takes g6, and when the king moves, knight e6 check. And the problem again is this queen's coming in. And now white is down 3 points of material. Well, this is a mate in 13 moves with best play. That bishop is going to come to f7, and the queen sneaks into g6. And it really just highlights how bad these three pieces are for black. So black is really left with the queen trying to help defend, but even she doesn't have a good way to do it. White is controlling everything. Look at this knight. It controls all of these squares. Look at this bishop. Controls all of these squares. Look at this pawn. Controls these squares. This bishop is in the way for black, and that poor queen sitting on d7 can't do anything. Just complete domination. Yeah, press a J, I agree. Black's rooks are completely out of the game for this attack. So now, let's see the even stronger move back to the original position. I wanted to look at rook f6, as Webb mentioned it. Okay, this is an equal position still. So it's not too bad of a move. Rook f6 is equal. But even stronger, we're looking at over +1 for white, probably around 1.5, is rook to f5. This is an insane looking move to me. I don't know how you think to play rook f5 in the game unless you are constantly looking at exchange sacrifices. And I think it is something we should do, especially in classical chess. We need to look for ways to increase our advantage in the position. Rook to f5 is the best move. And it just looks crazy. There's two ways that black can take. And the only thing it really threatens is rook takes e5 for one pawn. All right, so let's say black takes. G takes f5. Now we can play e takes f5. So we're down 2 points in material. If you look at the point value at the top, we're threatening the bishop and our queen's lined up with the black king. So this f-pawn can move with a discovered check on the black king. If black tries to get out of the way, we take the bishop, white takes. Now you might be thinking here, this should be close to equal, right? It seems like black solved all the problems. The queen's ready to help defend, the bishop guards d8. It's not so easy. Bishop takes h5. Black still has the problem with the rooks, and white is much better. It's already 1.5 point advantage. White's also up 1 point of material, I should mention. And if black tries a move like bishop takes g5 to win material back, that bishop needed to help guard d6. This rook flies in. Our queen's ready to come in soon. And where does this queen go? Queen here, there's actually bishop takes f7. It's a mate in 9 moves. So the position is completely falling apart. Let's try this. Queen e8. Well, now there's queen f5 hitting the bishop. This pawn is pinned. Yeah, this is bad. It's already saying a +38. Okay, there was one other line I wanted to look at here. So after rook f5, what if black doesn't play g takes f5? Let's look at bishop to f8. So just kind of sitting back and playing defense. Rook takes e5, bishop to g7. Now here, there are multiple moves that hold advantage for white, but I want you guys to tell me what is the best move for white. Put your answers in the chat. Top move for white. I think you guys are probably starting to see why this is such a great example of the exchange sack. Patrick is saying silicon move. Yeah, it is an engine move, but I think humans can find it. And that's what we're trying to learn today. How to start to appreciate these types of moves. And I think Alpha Zero, when that chess computer first came out, it really started to teach us the value of these long-term positional sacrifices. And a lot of top GMs now, especially the younger ones that have been training with like the neural network style engines from a young age, they're starting to look more and more like Alpha Zero. Okay, Constantine is saying rook to d6 with the idea of taking on e6 next. I'm going to be impressed. If anyone gets the top move here, I'm going to be impressed. Rook to d6 was not in the top 3, but I'm thinking that it's still going to be an advantage for white. Let's see who can get the top move. That's true. Black might be able to trade queen for 2 rooks in that line after rook d6. Everybody's stumped, I think. Usually the answers are coming in quicker. Semicolon is saying rook to d5. Ian is saying rook e to d5. Larry's saying knight to d6. Patrick, bishop takes h5. Zweb, rook d8, but don't have a line. Okay, I'm impressed. A couple of you guys got the answer. Semicolon and Ian both got it correct. Semicolon didn't specify which rook, but I think he had the right one. It's rook e to d5. This is the strongest move in the position. And let's look at the imbalances again here. We got the bad rooks for black. White is dominating the d file, so both of these rooks are good for white. And if bishop takes d5, again we go e takes d5. We have this protected pass pawn. We have bishop takes h5 threatened. Active queen, active rook, knight outpost. This is a 1.5 point advantage for white. So rook e to d5 was the move, allowing another exchange sacrifice. This was just a crazy position. Let's go back to the start. An example of multiple ways to push our advantage with exchange sacrifices. Rook to f5, rook to d5, both are top moves. If you want a non-exchange sac line here, the third best move for white is bishop to f1. And the idea is the bishop can try to come out to h3 and weaken the light squares for white that way. So thinking back to why would we play rook to d5? Why would we play rook to f5? We're trying to eliminate the light square bishop. And in turn, that weakens the light squares for black. Another way you could do that here, but it's just not quite as strong, is to go for a light square bishop trade. So after this, let's say bishop takes here is played. That's going to be a mistake because the f-pawn drops. Interestingly here, one of the top moves for black, it's actually the top move, is to sacrifice the exchange themselves. Bishop takes, because now at least black really fights for the light squares. We don't have a light square bishop, and our rooks aren't really able to get in yet. So this is around a half a pawn advantage for white, but that was the top idea for black, was to sacrifice their rook for our light square bishop. So this position is all about controlling the light squares. Okay, so that was the last example. Any other questions before we kind of summarize the lesson? Common factor also seems to be favorably changing the pawn structure as part of the sacrifice. Yes, that's right. So usually we're seeing our bishop become stronger. The bishop that's the same color as the one that we just sacrificed for. So if we remove the light square bishop for black, it tends to be our light square bishop getting stronger by getting to pick how to change the pawn structure. That's exactly right. Okay, so let's summarize this. We saw many successful exchange sacks, but in your games, these aren't always going to be successful. So keep that in mind. You need to evaluate each exchange sac individually. And some of the key themes are opposite colored bishops. We see that quite a bit. Keeping a knight that controls the color complex that has become weak for the opponent. And also using pawns to restrict your opponent's rooks. So as you approach the endgame, the rooks start to become really strong, right? Because they have open files, they can get behind our pawns, next to our pawns, start attacking everything. It's always important to control that rook of the opponent when you sacrifice the exchange. So not only are we looking at these positions where our bishop or our knight is very strong after the exchange sack, you also want the opponent's rook to be weak. You want to lower the value of that rook, raise the value of your bishop or knight. So kind of thinking back to that question, how many points is each piece worth? Go both directions. Raise the value of your piece, lower the value of your opponent's, and that's when you can start to even shift it or flip it, where that should be lower value piece is actually stronger than the higher value piece.